Clap a little. You can be seated for a moment. I'm not sure for how long, though, but at least for a moment. The gospel passage that we read this morning, the resurrectional gospel. So I think I've shared with you before that Orthodox has 11 readings from the Gospels about the resurrection of Christ. And which is why I encourage you to be here. Part of our preparation for the Divine Liturgy, people often think about, so they come to confession and they say, oh, I didn't keep the fast, you know. And so there was a priest once, I always tell people, that wrote an article called The Most Confessed Sin, is I didn't keep the fast. Which is kind of silly, because it's debatable whether that's even a sin. You have freedom, you know. You're choosing to participate or not participate in the fast. It's not some sort of law that you're under. It's for your own good, but that's something that you do. But so we talk about these things, we make these limitations, but where was I going with this?
The 11 Gospels.
So the 11 Gospels. Right. And so part of the reason that people feel a compulsion to confess that they didn't keep the fast is because they know that keeping the fast is part of preparation for Holy Communion. But how often do they say, I never go to Orthodox? I never go to Vespers. I don't come to church during the week. That's usually not in people's confessions. They take it for granted that they just don't show up. But the problem is that Orthros and Vespers, these services really are a way of preparing us for the Eucharist. They grow out of that. The Church's experience of the Eucharist and the Divine Liturgy expands and grows. And so all of these prayers are in preparation. And one of the ways that we prepare is by remembering all of the accounts of Christ's resurrection in sequence. So there's 11 of them, but through 11 Sundays every year, we're constantly meditating on the reality of Christ's resurrection, that he's in our midst. And so when we read about the road to Emmaus, we hear how the disciples, they say, did not our hearts burn within us while he walked with us and spoke with us? And when he broke the bread, they know him. And so hearing that passage right before the Divine Liturgy, we hear about Luke and Cleopas being with the risen Lord and how he blesses bread and breaks it and gives it to them, and then they know him. And so we see that the Eucharist is all about gathering together with the risen Lord. And we say it to one another as the clergy, and sometimes we hear people say it to the faithful as well. Christ is in our midst. And the people respond, he is and never shall be. And so when we go to Orthodox, we're preparing for the Divine Liturgy. So I encourage you to do that. But what struck me today was we read the passage about Mary Magdalene and how she goes to the tomb and she finds it empty, and she finds two angels standing where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. And they tell her that the Lord is risen. And then she encounters the Lord. And she's weeping because she doesn't know what's happened. Where is he? They've taken away the body of my Lord, and I don't know where they've laid him, is what she says. And what the hymn that we just sang in Orthros says, which is really beautiful, is that it says, not in vain were the tears of Mary shed. Not in vain were the tears of Mary shed. Because of these tears, she was made worthy to behold the risen Christ. And so what is that telling us about our participation in Orthros and in the services of the church as we prepare for the Divine Liturgy? Is that what they do and what we seek to do is to cultivate a heart that's a broken heart, that has tears. Because when we have those tears in the midst of the church and in the midst of our prayer with one another, it's not in vain, because we are made worthy to behold the risen Christ in our midst. And so, I encourage you, that was a little bit of a jab, to come to the services, to actually make the time to be here for Orthros and Vespers and all of these things, and to remember that it's not just fasting that helps us to prepare for the Divine Liturgy, but it's also being here during the prayers that themselves are a preparation for the Divine Liturgy. But also to remember that when you come here and you bring a broken heart and you bring tears before the Lord, those tears are never in vain. They are never in vain. They're something that washes you and makes you worthy of beholding the risen Christ and of standing in his midst. Amen.